The chief exec of the NHS and most of the leaders of the trade unions in Britain all say that you, Boris and Nigel are wrong. Why should the public trust you?
I'm not asking the public to trust me, I'm asking the public to trust themselves. I'm asking the British public to take back control of our destiny from those organisations which are distant, unaccountable, elitist and don't have their own interests at heart. Absolutely. Because I think the people in this country have had enough of experts with organisations from acronyms saying from organisations with acronyms saying that they know what is best against
Experts terrify me. It's so hard to know who to trust. Does anyone really know what we're doing? Or are we all just flying blind?
I think the people in this country have had enough of experts. Control.
Let me tell you a story about a deadly pandemic, a president who ignored it, and the people who didn't believe that the virus even existed. It started in Los Angeles. The year was 1981, and a doctor named Michael Gottlieb noticed that 5 young men had gotten sick or died recently from a rare kind of pneumonia that you wouldn't normally expect young men to get. It looked like their immune systems had somehow shut down, and in all 5 cases, the men happened to be gay. Other doctors started noticing similar cases, and it quickly became clear that an epidemic was underway. But almost all the experts initially focused on gay men. There had been reports for years of intravenous drug users dying of something people called junkie flu, but the US still charges people for healthcare. Those drug users tended to be poor, and therefore weren't as likely to go to the doctor and report their symptoms. By the time anyone noticed that they were dying of the same thing, experts were already calling the disease gay-related immune deficiency, or GRID. And what you name a disease is a critical thing, because it affects how people respond to it, how much they judge themselves to be at risk, and what kind of research gets done. All of which affects how deadly it turns out to be.
I would like to begin by announcing some important developments in our war against the Chinese virus.
Even though the disease was later renamed AIDS, the idea that it was gay-related took hold in a lot of people. Nobody knew what caused it, but a lot of media coverage focused on gay victims who took party drugs or had many sexual partners. And so the hypothesis emerged that it was caused by the gay lifestyle. You know, that thing that definitely exists, that one gay lifestyle that all gay people have, with the drugs and the sex and the voguing. It must weaken your immune system somehow. But the evidence was clear. People who didn't do those things were still getting it. So some experts started to suspect that AIDS might be caused by a retrovirus, a special kind of virus that first evolved 450 million years ago. It's tough to get more retro than that. Among the experts investigating the virus angle was Robert Gallo, a scientist at the USA's National Institute for Health. He'd previously discovered 2 kinds of retrovirus that affect humans. He called them HTLV1 and HTLV2. And he won prizes for this work, so he was a very prominent expert. But in 1983, it wasn't Gallo. It was a French team at the Pasteur Institute in Paris who did some tests on AIDS patients and found a mystery retrovirus. They called it LAV, which stood for lymphedema, which stood for the AIDS virus, and they sent their results to Robert Gallo. After all, he's Mr. Retrovirus. And he said, hey, this is great stuff. You should publish it in Science, big prestigious journal. Tell you what, I'll even write the abstract for you. You know, the bit at the top of the article that most people don't read beyond. And he did write it. And he said that the French virus was similar to his own HTLV, a claim that the paper did not support. And the French team said, hey, this isn't one of yours. This is a new thing that we just found. They even sent him a sample, like, here, take a look. And a few months later, this happened.
First, the probable cause of AIDS has been found. A variant of a known human cancer virus. I would like to turn now to the eminent scientist who has made the breakthrough which promised the conference today, and call upon Dr. Robert Gallo with applause and appreciation as Secretary of Health and Human Services, and with the appreciation of the American people. And I'd like to ask Dr. Gallo...
Robert Gallo, with the backing of the American government, announced that his team had found the cause of AIDS. A retrovirus, which he called HTLV-3. Under a microscope, Gallo's virus was photographed wearing tiny berets and carrying baguettes just nanometers across. And as if that wasn't enough, genetic testing later revealed it to be 99% identical to the French sample. Now, one of two things probably happened here. Either Gallo stole the French sample and tried to pass it off as his own discovery, or there was some cross-contamination in the lab and some of the French virus got on his equipment. It does happen. We don't know for sure. One thing Gallo did have going in his favor, though, was that he wasn't just an expert. He was an American expert. The Reagan regime had been heavily criticized for not really doing anything about the AIDS crisis, so when Gallo said he thought he'd found the cause, they were quick to wheel him out. So quick, in fact, that at the time of that press conference, his work hadn't even been published or peer-reviewed yet. But just a few hours afterwards, the US government filed a lucrative patent for an antibody test. Eventually, Gallo was forced to admit that the virus he found was not a species of HTLV. There was an out-of-court settlement with the French government, and in 1986, the virus had a new name: HIV. And that sort of thing terrifies me. The idea that someone can become an influential expert, even influence government, not necessarily because they know the answers, because they are a pawn in someone else's political game. According to philosophy professor Miranda Fricker, a good expert needs three things. They need to be competent and trustworthy. That means they need to know the truth and tell the truth. But the third thing an expert needs is what she calls working indicator properties, which is really just a fancy philosophical way of saying they need to look the part. So sometimes you will get experts on the show. How do you choose the experts that you bring on?
Well, we want the person who actually knows, right? That's what I want to bring to the audience is, hey, there is a person out there who has studied this for their entire lives, right? Or for decades or for years, or they have experienced the thing firsthand is another type of expert that we have on. And we're going to introduce them to you, bring them into your living room so that you really get to meet them. I think that's really, really valuable. So, for instance, we did a segment on immigration, and one of the points we made was that, you know, immigration doesn't work the way that in the United States we normally think of, where you have, you know, people sneaking across the border to steal jobs and that sort of thing. There's a lot of like statistical demographic facts that the average person doesn't understand. For instance, that the rate of immigration is actually at an all-time low is one thing that you would not be able to tell from watching the contemporary political discourse in America. And other things like that, right? So we brought on a professor who has literally been doing field research on immigration since the 70s. He goes down to, you know, the border, the America's southern border, and does field research. He interviews people, he takes notes. How long have you been here? Do you know anyone who's crossed the border, etc. Just like straight up demographic research using, you know, peer-reviewed techniques. And he publishes that data. And, you know, the US government uses his data set, right, to draw their own conclusions. And so when this dude comes on and says, immigration is actually at an all-time low, this is the dude who knows. You know what I mean? It's a perspective we don't often get because, you know, he's not particularly, you know, media trained or you know, telegenic or any of those other sorts of things that your average pundit is. He just happens